Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss notes series, where I give my notes and thoughts and just sort of role-playing game and D&D rules and whatever notes and stuff in general for Out of the Abyss, which is the D&D 5th edition Underdark adventure, as I DM my group of intrepid players through this fun adventure campaign at my friendly local game store. So if this is the first time you're watching this video series, this is not a blow-by-blow actual play. This is just a summary of each week's session, and then I just put notes and stuff, just general tips, and I try to be pretty transparent on my thoughts as a DM. So if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much. And if you're a new viewer, thank you so much. So let's just move right ahead and get to a viewer feedback. So let me put on my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and we can see what we can see. So got a few comments back on video 65, the purple worm fight video. That was a lot of fun to run that session, and also a lot of fun to make that video. Had a lot of fun with inserting video clips of worms and stuff from like Dune. Okay. Let's see. Twisted Tentacle N said, I'm having the same problem with my group, 7 characters being too strong for the campaign. Remember that most out of the box, off the shelf, official D&D stuff is usually written for 4 to 6 characters of the recommended level. So my current group is 8. I've been anywhere up to 12. Twisted Tentacle Inn here has 7 characters. So my players polymorphed the purple worm in the first round. Its mental saves are terrible. Okay, yeah. I think polymorph is a wisdom save. Into a caterpillar. Then they threw it at the drow egg hunters as the players left the nursery, which I have to admit is kind of funny. So as a DM, I'd be like, but just as a player in general, okay, that's pretty funny. It's amazing when you think something will be an epic battle and the players just trivialize it. Yeah, that's true. That's a bummer for a DM. Also, rope trick can be abused, so I'd be careful to not make it so they do that with every major encounter. Yeah, there's a couple things to kind of look at here. And I'll give more specific notes in general, but what I responded to Twisted Tentacle in, I said, I agree with your points. Personally, I'm getting creative with how I make encounters more challenging when the party is more powerful and the campaign is written for. And I've had that challenge with Out of the Abyss almost since the beginning, which it has been challenging, but it's also taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot more about DMing and game balance and counterbalance for 5th edition specifically. So, some of the things you could do, you could say you could give it a better save against polymorph, not just more HP. I gave the purple worm in my encounter more HP because it was so many players on one enemy. So you could get a better save against polymorph if you wanted. There's always the good old fashioned 2 worms crash in instead of 1. And then, let's talk about the polymorph, and then we'll talk about rope trick. As written, I went and looked up polymorph before recording this video. It just says a creature you can see. If it fails its will save, you can polymorph it into something that is its current CR or lower, and then it takes on all the characteristics, the attributes from whatever of what it's been polymorphed into. So yeah, you got this CR 15 thing bust in, and they're like polymorph, and suddenly it's a caterpillar. So yeah, okay, it's fair within the rules, and I wouldn't disallow it, but I might, because remember, one of the reasons I didn't have problems giving the purple worm in my session more hit points, a lot more hit points, because it's protecting its eggs. It's there to protect its eggs. So it's like, Argh! So since this is a will save, you could, I think, justifiably, without even calling it a cheat, say, well, its will save is better because it's here to defend its eggs. So it's kind of a special situation. It's not just a purple worm that's kind of bumbling along being a purple worm. You could also, I think in this case, because the humming is happening. The reason that this purple worm showed up in my campaign, and I'm assuming the same thing with Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm assuming they were in the Worm Nursery because the drow egg hunters were there and stuff. Hey, you're in the nursery, so there's no problem to bring another worm or even another worm after that in. So, in my particular case, the characters had set, or not the characters, the Fomorian they fought had run in as close as it could to one of those echo chambers and was bellowing to set off that humming, and it attracted a purple worm. So, yep, you polymorphed it, but here comes another purple worm attracted by that humming. So it's just really up to, do you really want them to have the challenge of finding a purple worm or not? But yeah, you could bring 2 purple worms in at the same time, or 3. I mean, there's, really in my session, I really thought the players would run. Again, I was surprised that they stood and fought. So if they really wanted to fight a worm or you really wanted that to be a high point of this part of the adventure, there's ways to bring a worm into it. At the same time, you don't want to penalize player creativity. That is a creative solution. We're going to polymorph that thing and then throw it at the drow hunters. So that was pretty funny. So there's different ways to go about it. It really depends on what you're wanting to have happen and how much you're wanting to challenge your players. Another point, polymorph's not a cheat, and they did overcome the encounter with a valid spell. However, polymorphing a CR15 monster into a caterpillar, I don't know if that deserves full XP. I don't know. I'd have to think that through. Some players would be like, well, we overcame it. And then others like, yeah, but you didn't really, I mean, you did, but you didn't, you weren't really at threat of life or limb because it happened in the first round. So I might adjust how much XP is awarded for that, because experience points are supposed to be based on, what did you do to overcome, like what threat did you overcome, right? And polymorphing in the first round is not, you didn't stand against the same threat as a multi-round fight toe-to-toe with a purple worm. So it's something I'd have to think about. Rope trick, yeah, it could become one of those spells like Liamon's tiny hut or some other, spells that provide a sanctuary or a retreat. The thing to remember with rope trick is that it only lasts for up to an hour. So there's some creatures that might just hang out around the rope. And I don't see anything that prevents, if let's say you're fighting intelligent monsters, if they see you climbing up the rope and disappearing, there's nothing to prevent them from climbing up the rope after you, right? You'd have to sit there and defend that entrance if I remember the spell correctly. There's a lot of spells that can be abused. So, you just get creative. You could just have creatures wait them out. Maybe there's a spellcaster with the bad guys that knows, hey, if we wait long enough, that spell will end on its own, or maybe they can counter spell it as it's being cast. Maybe they can maybe other monsters can try to crawl up the rope. I mean, there's ways to still make it challenging. But yeah, every DM faces that, where there's this really cool spell that players being players, they want to maximize their safety. They're going to use and or abuse. So, but anyway, you don't want to, you don't want to go against it so much to where you're basically soft banning the spell. In some ways, players can make us be better DMs by coming up with creative ways to still make it challenging. And then sometimes you just like, oh, hey, that was a good plan. And like in this case, casting rope trick when the purple worm showed up was a good plan. So I definitely didn't rule against it, or try to find a way around it. But now if every time any encounter comes up, they rope trick, that's going to get boring. So find interesting ways around there. So okay, thanks so much for your comments, Twisted Tentacle Inn. I think that might be the first time you've commented, or if it isn't, it's been a while. So either way, thanks for your comment. Rob Plummer who we hear from quite a bit. Hey, Rob, how's it going? Said, hey there, Shane. Keep in mind that an item of teleportation is like the spell. There's always a chance they teleport someplace other than where they planned. Yeah, in general, I agree with that. Absolutely. Well, what Rob's referring to here is it's an item I completely made up for my version of the campaign. It's the Wand of Limited, Vengeancy Underdark Teleportation. And it's just this wand that Viseron, the Drow Archmage, gave the players, and it allows them to do very limited teleportation. They can either teleport from the Tower of Vengeance cavern to the last place they teleported from, or they can teleport from somewhere to the cavern of the Tower of Vengeance. That's it. It's very limited. One, because I don't want the players to abuse it, but two, it's hard to teleport in the Underdark because of all the Fair's Rest and all that. And, and things are getting even worse and wonkier as madness of the Demon Lords keeps spreading through the Fair's Rest. So it's completely a plot device because or I don't know if it's a plot device. It's a thing. It's a narrative device to make things easier, a story device to make things easier on the players, because the Underdark is big, very big. There's a lot of just slog travel. And, we've played this campaign enough that we've established that it takes a long time to travel in the Underdark, and it can be dangerous even with an expedition. So to facilitate, as they find the ingredients for the ritual that Viseron has asked them to find, they can easily teleport back to the Tower of Vengeance. And then from the Tower of Vengeance, they can only teleport to the last place they teleported in from. That's it. So yeah, but in general, I agree with you, Rob. For this case, since it's not a magical item per se with charges and stuff like that, or it can it can't only be used once per day and it recharges at dawn or any of that. It's just used as needed, but extremely limited. And Viseron did say don't use this in a trivial manner. So if they found a way to abuse it, I could say that it's stopping to work, or I could have some sort of consequence happen. But they did. I think one of the players asked last session, does it have charges? I said no. So it's just a wand. The wand is just the thing. It's not like a wand where you point it and cast things. It's just a wand or a rod-looking device. And then it doesn't have charges. I think one of my players asked if it has charges. I said no. It's just, it's a 10-minute ritual to cast it. So again, they also can't, since it takes 10 minutes, they can't use it as a, expeditious retreat kind of device. So let's see. And then Rob also said we're at the final fight at level 15. I tell you, Shane, they're mopping it up, and he did hashtag OP, so they're overpowered. You must scale big boss fights with the PCs by AC, HP resistance, but even more important is having other creatures as minions in a boss fight, if for nothing else but to make it more interesting. Agreed, Rob, 100%. Also, don't forget that, like with the upcoming Beholder fight, some creatures get, if they're in their lair, they get lair actions, and on top of possibly legendary actions. So the lair actions are something really cool. I don't know if they're new in 5th edition. They're new to me. Maybe they came up in 4th edition. I don't remember them from 3rd or before, but lair actions are really cool. It's like if you fight a beholder or a dragon or something in its lair, the lair itself can be dangerous to you. So let's see. Let's see if I said anything else to Rob. We have a brief talk about the Beholder fight. Rob Plummer says that the upcoming Beholder fight, I think it was actually better than the Demogorgon fight. Wow. But it's the layer, as we'll talk about in upcoming videos. I thought we were going to get towards the Beholder this video, but again, my party threw a wrench in the works, as parties do. But we still had fun. The layer of this Beholder is really crazy. It minimizes a lot of normal party tactics. So, okay, thanks, Rob. Thanks so much for the comments. Okay, Valendrave said I would have had Dawnbringer lost in the bulk in the worm's corpse. Remember, one of my monks got eaten by the worm, although he did survive due to a divine intervention, which wasn't just to be as softy as a DM, but it was to set up a cool reveal later in the game. So, I've talked about that in previous videos. And then he said if they tried to cut it out, another worm is on the way and they have to leave. This would remove this weapon from your monk and make him or her far less OP and more balanced. And then, let's see. Yes. And then he's like, but then I'm a ha ha ha. So yeah, Valendrave has commented many times about the monks and the having a sunblade, which basically turns them into a Jedi to a certain extent. Technically, uh, you know, it does turn out that even though the Dawnbringer kind of counts as a short sword, even though it's not. By the rules, Jeremy Crawford, one of the main rules guy for D&D, has even said like if you're a monk, you can't use a sun sword and all your monk abilities at the same time. I had misread that, but I had done it so long that I didn't want to retcon that away from my monk. So I just decided as a DM to let him keep doing that because I had allowed it for so long, not just 1 or 2 sessions. But yeah, Valendrave is, he's like on monks in the Sunblade, which it does make him OP as heck. Um, so, but it'll be interesting to see in the Beholder fight what happens. Valendrave, good to hear from you. And then Sonic Halo has some interesting comments. I won't read the whole thing. I'll try to summarize, but I encourage you to go to video 65 and read his comments. Instead of talking about the higher some CR something is listed, the higher challenge rating, the less accurate it is. And I agree to a point. Like with the purple worm, yeah, it's a CR 15, but it's one against many. So it's acting once each round, and everything else is just hammering on it. So and when it acts, it's only getting to do so much stuff. So that right there makes CR kind of a little wonky at higher levels. As the parties get more powerful, and then if you have parties that are larger than 4, 5, or 6, right? As Sonic Halo says, the PC's power curve is crazy at higher levels. I agree. I'm seeing that even starting at level 6 or 7, the power curve, especially when you have a lot of PCs, it's just force multiplication. It gets crazy. Sonic Halo says the default scaling of monsters at 5e at high levels is weird. Based on the monster building rules in the DMG, and there are monster building rules in the DMG. I encourage you to go check those out if you want a better understanding of CR and monster building. Adding one or more resistance or immunity is supposed to offset how parties' damage scales dramatically, but it really doesn't. Okay, I haven't personally tinkered with that myself, but I'll take Sonic's word for it. So he feels that the only monster that is unnerfed by CR, like, okay, it's really the CR is accurate, as Tiamat from her adventure path. I think that's there's the first two adventures for 5e. I always forget the name of them. It's like Rise of Tiamat and Horde of the Dragon Queen, something like that. And she has said is unnerfed Tiamat from adventure path, and said she is nowhere near a real CR30 as she is listed. I'm not quite sure what he means by that, but if I'm reading this right, he's saying the only real high CR creature that he's found that really felt like a high challenge was Tiamat. So Sonic, I'm not quite sure what you meant by she's nowhere near a real CR30 is listed. Like she shouldn't be that high. Is that, I don't know if that's what you're saying, or even at CR30 she's not the damage of a CR30. And Sonic Halo says that he ignores the level 20 cap. So yeah, if you take characters above level 20, wow, because there's like even in Dragonlance or historically in a lot of D&D realms, when you hit level 20, the gods or whatever will intervene and take you from that plane of existence because you're too powerful. Level 20 is ridiculously powerful for the D&D engine. And I think in Dragonlance it was even earlier. I think if you got up around level 10 or 11, the Dragonlance, you were considered to be ridiculously powerful. So Sonic Halo, it sounds like he just keeps going. He could have a party of level 30 characters, so that's interesting. And then he goes on to say a purple worm is hard to calculate. Says that a vampire at CR13 is no match for a properly outfitted level 9 party. The properly outfitted is the key there, Sonic Halo. I think any monster, if you're prepared for it and are aware of its weaknesses and that, is going to not meet its challenge rating. In White Plume Mountain, the White Plume Mountain video series I did, the first time my party ran into the vampire, it kicked their butts. And they had been OP in everything up to that point. And I think they lost 2 party members, which was very rare. but they went back prepared and they kicked its butt. So but I take what you're saying. A CR13 monster vampire, a level 9 party that knows what it's doing can take a CR13 monster down. And remember, folks, CR13, the CR challenge rating, like if you have a CR13 monster opponent, then a group or a party of 4 13th level adventurers should be able to defeat it with minimal chance of one of the players dying. That's how CR is calculated. 4 characters at that level. And then, he's talking about whether he fiddled around with his vampire and made it so that the vampire could appear out of the mist and attack in the same turn, which is nasty. Okay, anyways, he says, don't pay attention to CR. Just, fill out an encounter. I still think I can't recommend enough Kobold Fight Club. I talked about them quite a bit last video, and I mentioned them before. Kobold Fight Club is a great site for not only determining how dangerous an encounter may be by the level and amount of players versus the CR and the monsters involved, but it also gives very good tips on adjusting the amount of XP, either higher or lower, depending on the encounter level. Because, and I talked about this with my party last session, and I said I'm not going to do this to you guys, but really I think with the amount of players you had plus the Shield Guardian, the XP for that purple worm should have been like 6,500, not 13,000, because they're like, do we level up? I said I'm not going to do that to you guys, but technically I could, because you're OP and stuff. Your party's so big. I said I'm not going to do that to you. But I have told them before that if you allow the NPCs from the expedition to get into a fight, that does affect your amount of XP, or maybe even loot and gold and stuff that you get. Maybe they want to share, because when the NPC, the Order of the Gauntlet NPC expedition members, which have sort of become their honor guard, charged in, that occupied the worm for 2 or 3 rounds and took heat off of the players, just by random dice roll. Who's the worm attacking? And that one of the Order of the Gauntlets got killed. Took a heavy hit. Now I'm not going to adjust the XP down in this one, because the Order of the Gauntlet, as they were like, no, we're going in whether you want us to go in or not, and they just kind of charged in, and they didn't say, hey, go get the Order of the Gauntlet and bring them in this fight. So I'm not going to adjust the XP on the party. I'm not going to be mean like that. But if they ever say, hey, go get the expedition and get them in the fight, that's going to affect their reward, because it minimizes the risk on their behalf. So anyway, Sonic, thanks for the comments. CR as a DM, especially in 5th edition, is a very important concept to learn. How to balance encounters, very important. So I can't encourage you enough, if you're a burgeoning DM or veteran DM or whatever, get up close and personal with CR. Maybe look at those monster creature building rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Kind of go look at Kobold Fight Club. Such a great site. Can't stress it enough. I would say that as I've been running Out of the Abyss, Kobold Fight Club and Elven Tower, who has a great guide to Out of the Abyss, have been although there's been other helpful sites, those have been the 2 most helpful. Okay, and then Kevin Braun, who has a Canadian flag on his icon, so I'm assuming you're from Canada. Hello, Kevin. So best looking video yet, Shane. Thanks. Yeah, I put a lot of video clips in there trying to have fun. So I've been following your video series since I began running UDA back in June, and I found your videos extremely helpful in my planning. My party is currently just re-entering the Underdark after an exciting homebrew story arc. I'd be interested to hear from folks out there, and I know that the results of this question in this video series would be skewed, because people are probably watching this for the most part because they're running Out of the Abyss. But I'd be curious to hear how many people out there homebrew versus traditional, written stuff from D&D or third parties. Said, no matter how far my party falls off the rails, and oh yes, your party will go off the rails. It is D&D after all. Your videos continue to help. So just want to say thank you for taking the time to make the video series. May you bless with many natural 20s. Thanks so much, Kevin. Yeah, I'm glad that these videos help. That's why I keep making them based on that kind of feedback. And may the odds of your dice rolls be always statistically in your favor. Okay, that is it for viewer feedback. Thanks for everybody who wrote in, and I appreciate hearing from all of you out there. I really enjoy doing the viewer feedback. So I'm going to take off my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and then we will proceed with recapping last session. Okay, I got my handy dandy notes here and my books and all this good stuff. So here we go. Let's see. First, I want to show off my coffee thing here. I work for a hospital that uses Epic, which is medical record software. A lot of the hospitals out there use it. Entire countries and provinces of countries are switching to Epic. So as just being on an Epic team, I got this really cool mug. And then when I was at Arkansas RPG Con last year, I bought this D20 sticker, so I stuck that on there. It looks pretty good. If any of you are interested in that sticker, a buddy of mine named Tim Hose, him and his wife make these and sell them, so I could put you in touch. I don't make any money off that, just letting you know. And speaking of Arkansas RPG Con, it's going to be, I think, August either 11th or 18th. I'd have to go look in Maumelle, Arkansas this year, and Shane Plays is a sponsor again. We had a great time last year. This next year should be really good too. I'll be there. I don't know if I'll be DMing anything. I'll definitely be playing and having fun. I may DM something. I don't know. Sometimes at cons, I'll one-shot other systems just to expose people to other role-playing game systems. But anyway, so go check it out. Just go to look for Arkansas RPG Con on Facebook, and I think it may be arpgcon.com website, but just search for Arkansas RPG Con. You'll find it. My friend Carl Heil does a good job with it, and it's got kind of a focus on OSR, like old school rules, old style gaming, but there's new stuff too. So there's a really good mix, and there's vendors, and there's a lot of fun. It's small enough to be intimate, but big enough that there's a good selection of games. There's a really good swag bag last year. So Myth Horde, Loot Crate folks were there. So anyway, there you go. So on the actual the session, so what I try to do is I try to give out notes ahead of time before I get into, okay, here's what happened. And there's a couple of things I wanted to point out. One is that Burning Hands does not need a visual eyes on the target to work. This is one of those cases where the player's questioning one of my decisions. I went, okay, well, let me go look. And I was like, okay, yeah. So as a DM, do entertain your players' questions or pushback to a point. I mean, if you've already made a ruling and you've explained your reasoning, and they just keep, just let, say, I've made my ruling, unless there's just some really unusual circumstance. But a lot of times I'll say, well, I think this, or I think that, or da-da-da. And they're like, well, what? And I'm like, okay, well, let me go look. And then sometimes I stick with my original ruling, and then sometimes I don't. And then sometimes it comes down to, well, they'll say, well, that doesn't make sense. And then that's when you say, and it sounds smart alecky, and I hate coming off that way, but I think it's true. D&D is a game system, not a physics and reality simulator. So sometimes the rules don't make sense, but those are the rules. Okay. For example, and this comes up a lot in other things, but here's one I can think of off the top of my head. A Cloak of Elvenkind, which in Out of the Abyss, you use, there's a drow version. I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's basically a Cloak of Elvenkind that will dissolve after an hour in the sunlight or something like that. It gives you advantage on stealth checks. Well, last session in the Purple Worm fight, the cleric laid down and covered up in her Cloak of Elvenkind and stealthed. Well, I mean, the Purple Worm is functioning on vibrations and sound, but a stealth check's a stealth check. So, I mean, as a DM, you can say, well, no, that wouldn't work because it's there. But for me, I usually go, okay, well, it's a stealth check. And that's where, D&D the game engine is a game engine, not necessarily a reality simulator, right? Anyway, I kind of went off on a tangent there. In this particular point, somebody had the warlock had cast Hunger of Hadar, and a character wanted to cast Burning Hands, but in order to cast Burning Hands, they had to be at range, and they didn't want to be right up close. So they wanted to step back into Hunger of Hadar, cast the spell, and then step back out of the darkness, after they cast the spell. And I was like, well, I think you have to visually see a spell target. And they were like, no, it's like a flamethrower. And I went, okay, well, let me go look. I said, since you're pushing back, I'll go look. And in this case, I feel the players were right. So, make sure to, don't just, iron-fistedly declare how something is in every case. But Burning Hands says, as you hold your hands with thumbs touching and fingers spread, a thin sheet of flame shoots forth from your outstretched fingertips. That's all it says. It doesn't say that, it doesn't say one target. It doesn't say a target that you can see or anything like that. So, yeah, I guess you could step back into a zone of darkness and flame it out and then step back out. So, just a point there. One, on Burning Hands, you don't have to visually see. You could just, I guess, close your eyes and just flame if you wanted, if you were fighting, like a Medusa or a Basilisk or something like that. So, that's one thing that I went into. Another thing I did was, players will have requests, and you're like, how do I handle that? I have no idea. So I had 2 requests like that this past session, one of which I will discuss as we go. But one I'll point out here, that the rogue and my rogue player is a veteran D&D player, but also a very creative person. They come up with neat and nifty stuff all the time, and they have the whole time I played with them. This is the same player who just statted out Eldith just to help and did a player sheet of Eldith for us, and comes up with great backstories. Same player that did Daggers, the blind rogue, for the first part of Out of the Abyss, and now has Grimy, the rogue dwarf. But anyway, he said he wanted to milk the venom from the purple worm and put it into a jar from the purple worm corpse. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, do I just allow that? Do I just say, yeah, you could do that? Or do I make it sort of a mini game? And I'm like, I'm thinking this rogue's probably never milked a purple worm before, right? Hold on, here's another cool thing about this. You're gonna, boop, that's pretty cool. And this thing works like a champ. I mean, it keeps stuff warm or cold for a long time. So, but it's kind of rattly when that lid's open. Okay, so I'm like, how do I do that? So just rather than stopping the game, here's a key tip I can give you as a DM. When at all possible, avoid trying to stop the game. Now, sometimes you have to use, like, this is a crucial clutch. I gotta think about this. I need to look up some rules. I need to see what some other people have done. Maybe I even there's been times where I've called a fellow DM or something that I'm like, hold on. I try to minimize that. Sometimes I've wanted to let the players decide what they're going to do. So I say, you guys talk amongst yourselves, and then I'll go up to the counter and chat with the store owner or the store employees or whatever, and just try to, yap and build relationships. And just because I enjoy the people at the store that run and work at the store that we play at. But anyway, this one, I said, okay, I'm not going to stop the game and figure this out. I'm just going to on the fly. So instead of, he's like, well, all I have to do is just walk up and milk it. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know purple worm biology. I don't know if Volo's Guide to Monsters has, cross sections of purple worms. I'm guessing they don't. But, Volo's Guide to Monsters, if you haven't seen it, goes pretty deep into the ecology and biology of a lot of monsters. I'm pretty sure the purple worm's not in there. Because it's like Volo's, I think, focuses on races that could also be players, I think. I can't remember. I'd have to go look again. There's a review I did out there. You can go check it out on Volo's Guide to Monsters and Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Yes, is still coming. Man, I got all my notes written up and everything like that. I just got to do the video. So anyway, he wants to milk the venom of the purple worm. And the purple worm has a big stinger on its tail. I mean, it killed that NPC. And I think at least one other player, the wizard, got zapped with it as well. Does a lot of damage. So I said, okay. I said, here's what we're gonna do. I said, and I said, I need an intelligence check. You can use nature if you have it or whatever, but I want an intelligence check. And that was just to kind of sort through, how am I going to do this? How do I get the venom out? Where's the venom going to come out at? I mean, obviously stinger, but right. And then I need a dex check after that to do it without stinging yourself. And that's what I came up with. I think that was fair enough. It was just on the fly. And then the intelligence check, if you made the intelligence check, then you just rolled the dex check. If you failed the intelligence check, then your dex check was at a disadvantage. Right? Because, yeah, you're being dexterous, but you're not quite sure what you're trying to do or avoid or whatever. I don't know. Is it a barb on the end of the stinger? Is it a just a stinger that's hollow that the venom injects? I don't know, right? So this is just kind of as a DM, make a roll, move on, or make a decision. Now, and to be fair, I made both of those at DC 10, an average check. He failed his intelligence check, and then he failed his dex check at disadvantage. So yes, he got his venom, but he got stung as if the purple worm attacked and hit with a stinger, and that's what I did. But since the purple worm was dead and its systems, were basically had shut down, and the venom wouldn't be pumping through as forcefully as normal, I just said you take half damage. So so he got stung. And I did the piercing damage, and I did the poison damage, but at half, starting at half. And then he's a dwarf, so he had poison resistance or something like that. So the poison part of it was at a further half. So I think he took a quarter of poison damage. But that's how I handled that, just as an example. And he was like, well, but I thought that was fair. You're trying to milk a purple worm. Have you ever milked a purple worm? I didn't tell you couldn't milk the purple worm, but man, this is kind of dangerous. This is some pretty stout poison. So that just to kind of give you an insight, that's how I handled that. Now in the future, if he wants to milk a purple worm, I'm not going to make him go through all that. I'll probably just give him a regular dex check with advantage, because now he knows what to do and what to avoid, right? Experience isn't just for points. It's for, hey, man, I figured out how to do this. So, okay, getting to the actual blow by blow. They're in the chamber. The party just died. Not died. The worm just died. The worm just died. And that's where they're at. So, they did revivify the one Order of the Gauntlet that had died. It had been within a minute, so they revivified him. And he was like, whoa, you saved me. Which was one of the things they wanted to have happen. They wanted, A, to do a nice thing, but 2, they wanted to continue to build the loyalty of this NPC expedition member, these NPC expedition members that they wanted, or that they have, right? So, which is nice, the role playing that. And then he wanted to keep going with them, but when you revivify, revivify at one point, and then that's it. You got 1 hit point, and they're like, no, you need to go back to the main expedition and rest and all that. You're valiant, and we get that, but for the good of the entire expedition, and so that you'll be good for us overall, we need you to go, get better. And he respected that, even though he reluctantly, so he went off. And then they went, they kind of kept exploring. So, and then one of the characters who likes to collect trophies, which is cool because the Vanguard of the Eye, which is their guild they're a part of, their guild hall starting to collect all these trophies. And the very first trophy they ever collected from the last Mine of Phandelver was the skull of the Nothic, which has one big eye that's mounted over their door. And so they're the Vanguard of the Eye, right? So the trophy thing, he wanted to cut some skin and get a tooth from the purple worm. So I said, well, that's going to take you a little while. So as the rest of the party keeps exploring, you'll be doing that. And he said, well, I'm okay with that. I'm a monk. I can move fast. I can get up next to him if I need to. Oh yeah. I don't know if I mentioned, in the viewer feedback, but yeah, there's 2 monks in the party. One of them, has a sunblade and the other one doesn't. And Valendrave was like, take this opportunity with the purple worm since he swallowed the monk to get rid of the sunblade. It was the other monk that got swallowed, and Valendrave's like, Drat. So I was like, wrong monk. He's like, Drat. So I don't know if I mentioned that during the viewer feedback. So anyway, you never know, Valendrave. Maybe in the future, they'll get swallowed by another purple worm. So, yeah. So here's what most of the party, and I am thinking, okay, they fought the purple worm. Off we go back to the Wormwrithings. Let's head to the Beholder lair, right? I'm thinking we're going to get about half of the Beholder lair encounter. Maybe not the fight kicked off, but they'll get to the Beholder. They'll meet the Beholder. They'll see the Beholder's lair, all that. No. Players being players, there's tunnel entrances out of this Worm Nursery that they want to explore. I'm thinking, as DM, boy, this is really dangerous, and they've got a mission. They're probably going to get out of here, but nope, players being players. They want to keep exploring. Fair enough, right? As DM, I'll facilitate that. I'm prepared for that. I'm just saying I had expected, and the best laid plans of DMs and men, never survive. It's like Murphy, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So, so they wanted, some of the party wanted to go south to the entrance that the Dark Hunters, the Drow, had come in and out of, had come in and then exited back out. And when the Fomorian had run in, that giant, that nasty giant with the evil eye, and he was fighting them, and then he was dying, and he was running back there, and he died right before he got there. So they wanted to go explore that way. So one player decides, I'm going to go get trophies off the purple worm, right? And the venom, the milking the purple worm hasn't happened yet. That happens later. I just pointed that out before we got into the main recap, to give you my insight on how I handle that. And there's another interesting request from the wizard player that I kind of had to on the fly come up with something that I think is kind of interesting. I'll talk about here in a second. So 2 of the players, the wizard and the warlock, decide to they go back to the expedition with the wounded, the guy they've just revivified, the NPC Order of the Gauntlet guy. They go back to the main expedition because they want to cast the ritual and go back to the Tower of Vengeance cavern and hand off the purple worm egg to Vizeron. So they head back that way, and I think it's in Cave 4. There was a couple of NPCs that, the rogue had said, stay there and guard this cave, and they're hearing all the purple worm fighting going on, and they're like, oh, and they're scared with their crossbows, and they said, what happened? And they're like, well, the purple worm's dead. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we're about to go in there and help with that. So I try to have some fun with the NPCs and give them personalities, where everyone's like, laughing or whatever, and everyone's like, okay, sure, yeah, you just stay there and keep guarding. And so they went back, dropped off the dude who's sick, updated Eldith, the NPC sort of right-hand lieutenant. The Eldith's been with them since the beginning, when they escaped Velkenvelv and, the very beginnings of Out of the Abyss, that dwarf scout. They updated her on everything, and then they used the wand of Vengeancey Underdark teleportation to, boom, I don't know what that noise was, I don't know, whatever, back to the Tower of Vengeance. And I think that's to the point where they're like, does this thing have charges? And I'm like, no, it's just, it works as it works. But Vizeron did say, don't abuse it. So they went back to the Tower of Vengeance. And, we'll get to them here in a second. because there's a little sub thing plays out there. But I will say, the guys that the expedition members they've left to man the outpost there are like, we're getting kind of bored. Do you think we could kind of maybe rotate, who's manning the outpost? Would that be cool? And they're like, yeah, sure. We just fought a purple worm. Do y'all want? And they're like, oh, you know what? Just tell you what, we do want to get that going, but it sounds like you got really important stuff going on. So you just let us know when you want to get that you know that rotation going. So that was like I said, I keep trying to have the NPC members not just be stat blocks, try to give them a little bit of personality. And the NPCs are building more and more respect for the party as they go, not just because they were told to support them, but because they see that these guys really are kick butt adventurers, and hey, they're kind of trying to protect us when they can, and that kind of thing. So anyway, so back to the Worm Nursery. They decided to go south, and they went into there's three, I think, area 5 echo chambers. I'll put that image up. And when you go south, you go into one of those. And what this is there's just those kind of resinous strands, like in the Worm Nursery, they're holding all the eggs, but in this case, they're just kind of stretched above on the cavern ceiling and stuff. A certain, I think the book says like 50 feet up. And any noise, even just speaking or metal clanking on metal, will set these things humming. And they were having some discussion. The rogue, they were trying to figure out which way did that Fomorian come from. They were trying to find the Fomorian's lair. And I said, well, there's not a lot of dust or whatever here. I said, but you can try to check. And so he was doing a tracking or investigating, whatever it is in 5th edition that you check. And I gave him a roll or whatever. And I said, well, you see a lot of recent little feet or humanoid sized feet, which would be the Dark Hunter drow that came in and out. And I said, and you do see that it looks like the larger footprints, so there would be a Fomorian or the whatever disturbed pebbles or whatever it is you're finding. It looks like that its chamber was is to the east. And then the bard player was asking the rogue player some stuff, and they went back and forth. And that they were talking, and I said, well, you didn't specifically tell me. I mean, they were like, which way did it go? And they were talking as if their characters were talking to each other. And it specifically says in the book that noise will any noise like that will set these things humming, and that was the humming they heard in the previous couple of sessions. And the purple worms build these chambers on purpose so that noise will set them humming, and the humming will attract a purple worm, right? So that it's like a defense system, it's an alarm system that the purple worms have set up. How they figured that out with their mental stats they have is beyond me, but they did, so more power to them. So I'll read you a little bit on these area 5s. Yeah, it says these 3 60-foot high caverns hollowed out and expanded by purple worms are set around area 8 as a defensive measure. Using their saliva, the worms have created thick resinous strands that stretch from wall to wall. These strands are 2 feet thick and suspended some 50 feet above the floor. Any noise in one of these chambers, including a normal speaking voice or metal striking metal, so any noise, causes, so I guess even, if somebody's walking heavy-footed, causes the strands to reverberate, creating a loud humming that echoes throughout the surrounding caverns, alerting the purple worms to the presence of trespassers. If the adventurers set off a humming in one of these echo chambers, a distant rumbling can be heard and felt as a purple worm burrows toward the egg chamber, arriving here in 1d4 minutes. So you can either roll randomly how long is it going to take to get there, or you can just decide how long it's going to take to get there, depending on what dramatic thing you want. I think in this case I rolled a 1d4 and I rolled a 1. So I know it's coming pretty quick. So they hear the humming. And they're like, oh, okay. and then they're like, and then they hear the rumbling, and they're like, "Oh, purple worm's coming, purple worm." So they're like, "Yikes!" So they run back into the main Area 8 Worm Nursery. Some people bolt for Area 4, which will take them so they can get back to the expedition. Some people do the worm trick, or the rope trick, because the rope trick's still there. It lasts for an hour, right? Speaking of the rope trick from the viewer feedback, it lasts for an hour, and I guess unless whoever cast it dispels it, and it doesn't require concentration. So some of them go up there, some of them run to back to kind of the cavern with the expedition and all that. And the purple worm does kind of bust in. And and this time I didn't really roll for which chamber. I had it come up from Area 7, which is where they're supposed to come from. Last video, I randomly rolled which area it came from because I had party members scattering all over the place, and I just thought it'd be fun. And yeah, it happened to bust in right on where the majority of them were running for, which was great. But anyway, and it circles for a little bit, doesn't see any problems, and it leaves. So now they know how the humming starts. They know the humming will require a purple worm, or will summon a purple worm. And they know that this echo chamber right now, there's only one that they know of. Although I did say, previously you're hearing humming from all over, so they have an idea that there's other ones, but they only know of specifically one, and they're like, "Ooh, we got to be really quiet." And which led into, who's wearing what kind of armor, and it led into a discussion of how stealthy is the Shield Guardian. And it's a big metal, large clanking thing. So I'm ruling that it's not real stealthy. Now, it can attempt stealth, but if it's in a room where even a regular speaking conversation or metal on metal is going to set off an alarm, I'm going to rule that unless you put silence or something, or do something to minimize, put pillows on its feet, or I don't know, something, oil all its joints, that it's going to make a normal amount of noise, but it can, I'm not going to take it to the point where they can never stealth with it around. But if it's so sensitive that a normal speaking voice will set off humming 50 feet up, then, it's probably not a good thing to take with you. So they left the Shield Guardian behind at the main expedition. And it also that led into, because there was a couple times they were saying, I want the Shield Guardian to do this, and I want the Shield Guardian to do that, and da-da-da-da. And I kind of revisited, I may have even mentioned this last video, but I revisited, what can you do with the Shield Guardian? Because they're really cool, but they're not just, normally intelligent servants that can follow complicated orders. So let's take a look at the Shield Guardian, at what it can do. And, you probably want to know this because, right, there's a Shield Guardian in this adventure that your players could potentially acquire temporarily from that chess match in Gottelgrim, which my players did after many attempts. A Shield Guardian's solitary focus is to protect the amulet's wearer. The amulet's wearer can command the Guardian to attack its enemies or to guard the wielder against attack. If an attack threatens to injure the wearer, the construct can magically absorb the blow into its own body, even at a distance. That's it. I mean, that's what you can do. You can't say, hey, go grab that egg and over there and carry it. You can't say, stay here while I go here and take orders from that person. This is the kind of stuff that's been coming up. And you can't transfer ownership, or you can't, the only way you can transfer ownership is by giving its amulet to another creature. So like they had a thing where they wanted the Shield Guardian to stay at the expedition, so they temporarily gave the amulet to Eldith because she's trustworthy and we'll give it back. So that's it. I mean, there's been stuff come up where I allowed for a couple of sessions because I wasn't paying attention. Here's an example where I said, okay, from this point forward, this is how the Shield Guardian works. because it had only been a couple of sessions where, uh, with the Sunblade, we'd been using it a certain way for months, so I didn't want to retcon it. My bad. I'm not going to penalize the players for that, right? So, anyway, so just a note on the Shield Guardian: if your players are using it, it is very, very useful. But you can't give it complicated commands and it'll just obey it like a servant. It has to involve defending or the master or attacking the master's enemies. That's really kind of the extent. And then it will, if it's near you, it adds to your armor class. And even if at a distance, I think up to like 60 feet or something like that, it will absorb half the damage you take. They're really nice, but they're dumb. You can only do so much with them. I mean, they're dumber than Frankenstein, right? Frankenstein's monster. This Frankenstein's monster at least attempts to puzzle through things, right? It'd probably get it wrong if you gave it a command, but at least try. Enough of all that. Okay, so anyway, they decided to go back after the purple worm left, and they left Thorin the dwarf because he's in like plate mail armor, and they left the Shield Guardian with the main expedition, and then they headed back down south again. And this time, knowing what the deal was, I said, give me a DC, or give me a group stealth check, not individual stealth checks, but a group stealth check. And I've discussed how those work before. Go look it up if you're confused or you don't know what I mean by that. But it's not just everybody rolls initial, and you roll as a group, and then the group fails or succeeds as a group. I just made it a DC 10. I can't remember if the book is if that's what the book says or not. I made it a DC 10 because DC 10 is like average. 5 is extremely easy. 15 is getting kind of tough. 20 is really, really, really like epic hard, right? That's kind of a good way to go with that. So they went south, successfully made it through the egg chamber, and then went into the Fomorian's chamber. Okay. And we're going to pause there and we'll go, because this is kind of how I did it with my players, because they split the party by people teleporting back to the Tower of Vengeance. So, I'm like, okay, stop there and let me go back and deal with them. You don't want to leave any particular player or group of players hanging too long. If they split the party, kind of jump back and forth, like think of like a TV show, you'll spend a little time with this and then you'll jump over to this subplot and then you'll jump, to keep things moving. Now, as long as there's a good story reason to split the party, then I'll do that. And in this case, yeah, there's a pretty good story reason. Hey, if we're not leaving this Worm Nursery immediately, we're at least going to go get this worm egg to Vizeron and report. So that made sense to me. Now, sometimes a player or players will just do, I'm going to go over here for no apparent reason other than I just want my moment or whatever. I'll be like, okay, but it may be a while before we get back to you. I've had players go the rest of the session with no interaction. And I'm like, I just want you to, because they're not doing it in any way that really makes a lot of sense. They're just doing it to do it, right? Players being players. And I'll just warn them. I'll say it may be a while before I get to you. And they're like, oh, and they're like, I'm okay with that. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. And I mean, and then literally, either I get to them right at the end for a couple of minutes, or nothing happens with them that session. So you gotta kind of balance out, how that goes. So anyway, they, the wizard and the warlock went back with the purple worm egg, and we're kind of walking up to the Tower of Vengeance, and the doors, the big imposing open, and Grin the apprentice came out. And saw the purple worm egg and was like, oh, it's very good. And was like, master is indisposed because, by the book, Vizeron is intensely working on this ritual. He's preparing himself to cast the ritual. And it's very intense, very draining. And that's also a good reason to explain, well, why doesn't he just run around and collect these components? Well, it's getting ready for the ritual is no small thing. So the players kind of report in and he says, what about the beholder eye? And they're like, yeah, we're still working on that. He's like, all right. And then he sees the wizard, who is a new player into the campaign. He's the super smart wizard that somehow, and I narrated this, didn't play that. He's so smart, and he really is. He's got like a level 20 intelligence, and he's just a, playing the characters is very smart. Uh, Made his way into the Tower of Vengeance on his own, you know, and like, who are you? And Grin's like, who are you? And the player's like, oh, I'm so and so. By the way, you might want to work on your defenses. I was able to get in no problem. And Grin's like, oh, really? So that probably wasn't the wisest thing to say. And he's like, Master will be quite interested to learn of your arrival and how you arrived and things like that. So that was fun. And then so they keep talking, and and uh, and the wizard character said, well, "Where's Viseron?" Because he hasn't met Viseron yet. This archmage, he's like, well, he's studying and preparing today. He's like, oh, so I bet you he has a lot of really great uh, books, a great library. Can I borrow one of his books? And Grin's like, you know, taken aback by kind of the audacity of this request. And this is where I'm getting into where I had to kind of come up on the spot with a mechanics of doing something. So I actually came up with a whole system of mechanics on reading this book and how dangerous it may be, and difficulty checks and saves and all this stuff. And the player actually did at least one roll during this session during a rest when his character was reading the book. And I completely forgot to detail it in this video, even though I kept mentioning mechanics. But I've made a note to go over it in next video. So set tight, true believer. And Grin's like, I'm not sure that even if you could, that you would want to. And he's intimating that, Viseron deals with some dark, deadly stuff. I mean, this is a Drow Archmage. I mean, the only reason that he's just mad at Menzoberranzan. He's not a good guy. He's allied with the characters, but that doesn't mean he's a good guy. This is a nasty dude. And he's like, I'm not sure that you would want to, but I'll tell you what, I'll ask. And he kind of bows, and he goes. He says, wait here, and he takes the purple worm egg, goes back into the tower, and a few minutes later he comes out. And I kind of said that, I said he doesn't wear glasses or anything. I said, but if he did, he would be kind of coming out like, like this, like, kind of trying to maintain his composure, but, kind of, ruffled. and he's got kind of a book. And he says, Master is very pleased at your progress and urges you nothing but speed and continuing because, the situation is dire kind of thing. He also says, I believe Master before gave you some information, directions or whatever on how to find the Beholder's Lair. But, here it is again if you need it. And I couldn't remember if I did that before, so I kind of took this opportunity to do that. It's basically 8 miles away or 12 miles away or something like that from, I'll look in the book, from the Worm Nursery. So even though that I guess we don't really know where the Worm Nursery is, you kind of have to find it. The Beholder's Lair is, the vast oblivion, 12 miles from the Purple Worm Nursery. So they get a note and written in common, so everybody can read it in that spidery, elegant, prissy language or writing of even the writing is arrogant. Viseron, it basically says 12 miles from the Worm Nursery, and it is our best guess, assuming that the Worm Nursery is blah blah blah. I was just kind of winging it. And, at one point the players were like, well, which direction from the Worm Nursery? Doesn't mention that in the book, best I could tell. So I just said, west. I just made something up. So now they're, wanting to go west and all that. But anyway, so, and then, the wizard's like, oh, so you got a book there. And, Grin is like, oh, well, yeah, my Master surprisingly has honored your request. And he kind of holds the book out. And I'm trying to think, well, how do I describe this book? So I described it as like very deep nightshade blue because I am a Dragonlance fan, and the spell books of Fist and Dantalus, which was the super powerful mage that Raceland, basically hero worshipped. And then, Raceland on a certain level started becoming Fist and Daedalus. Anyway, go read the Dragonlance stuff. It describes these night blue bound spell books that are chill to the touch. And so that's how I described this, because I needed something on the fly. And when you're responding to care, this is one of those things, there's this concept of say yes to your players. Sometimes I'll be like, no, he's not going to loan you a book. Right. But in this case, I was like, well, that's kind of fun. And this particular player hasn't had a chance to shine yet, with moments and roleplay. So here's the book. And also, Viseron, this stuff is like almost like a Necronomicon type book, right? If you're familiar with the Cthulhu mythos, you can go crazy reading this book. It's not a magical item per se, even though the binding is, they did an identifier or something on it later. And the binding is slightly magical, right? But it's not a magical item per se, but it's always chill to the touch, and it's just nasty. And it is just filled full of deep, dark, awful thoughts and truths on evil magic, basically. And so Viseron's like, okay, one, I'm really, really upset with this guy for sneaking in to my area as if it's no big deal. And two, the audacity to ask to read one of my books. So he's thinking, read it. And he's expecting that it'll just eat his brains. Right. So, and then, they didn't talk with Viseron, but that's how I'm role playing Viseron in my head, like Viseron's motive. And like, okay. Cause it's like, what? He snuck in and asked for a book, and Grin's like, kind of like, and they don't have the beholder eye yet. And, he's kind of like, and, that's why he came out kind of, ruffled. So anyway, so they give back the book, or he gives them the book, and, he's like, oh, and he's like, I'm looking forward to reading it. And Grin's like, yeah, I think the master's curious about you reading it as well. Or said something like that, kind of nasty and oily. And, the player did an insight check on Grin, I think rolled pretty well. And I was like, you don't detect any like malice beyond the fact that he's a arrogant drow that probably doesn't like you anyway. But it really does seem like that they're hinting to you, if not outright telling you, that this is a pretty heavy book. And they read it if you want to, kind of thing. Like, okay, so that wraps up that kind of subplot, and they ended up teleporting back and all of that. Now the rest of the group went down again to south to Area 5. They did not take the Shield Guardian or the Order of the Gauntlet with them, because the Order of the Gauntlet, I think, wears scale mail. I don't know, something like that. They were minimizing the amount of people that are going with them to reduce noise over the protest of the Order of the Gauntlet, which has become their honor guard in our campaign. They take it very seriously. That's why they charged in to fight a purple worm. And I gave them just a DC 10 stealth group check. They made it. Group stealth check. They made it. Went in there. One player stayed behind, I think, caught up with them, because another player also decided he wanted some worm skin or worm tooth or something like that. But anyway, so they went in to the Fomorian's chamber, and the Fomorian's chamber has some treasure and whatnot in it. Let's see. That's area 6. The caretaker's quarters. Phosphorescent lichen clings to the walls of this 30-foot high cavern. And of course, Stronk the Fomorian somehow developed a relationship with the purple worm eggs and the purple worms, and would take care of the eggs as if they were his own children, and was trying to summon the worms. That's why he was running to the chamber and bellowing. If you look around, you see the remnants of the Fomorian's grim mills, travelers lost in the Wormwrithings, or egg hunting adventurers. So there's humanoid bones and stuff laying around. Venturing into Strock's lair without waking him, because if they go in there before they fight him, he's in there sleeping and snoring, and you do a DC 12 dexterity stealth check to try not to wake him up. If you wake him up, he'll jump up, says killing egg thieves, and starts fighting. If he's reduced to half his hit points or fewer, he charges into the adjoining echo chamber and bellows to summon a purple worm before rejoining the battle. So that's why, even though the fight happened up in Area 8, I gave him the same behavior. You know, he's about to die or getting low, and he started charging towards Area 5 and bellowing. And then all the treasure Strong has taken from his victims has been placed under his sleeping skins for safekeeping. There's a big pile of skins, 40 platinum pieces, an electrum brooch worth 120 gold pieces, 6 gems worth of 50 gold pieces each, 2 potions of greater healing, and a book of drow poetry worth 100 gold pieces. So that's what they got into. They found all that, and then snuck back out. I don't think they went to Area 7, if I remember right, but Area 7 is just where most worms will come in and out of. And then also, that's where there's kind of a drop off, area. And that's where it like comes in and it drops off down into the caverns. And that's where the dark hunters come in and out of. And then also you can use that area to get back to the Wormwrithings proper. So you can get to Wormwrithings from Area 13, Area 7, and Area 1, because in Area 1 the ceiling collapsed in, but you can still get in and out with ropes and stuff like that. So if you're wanting in or out of the Worm Nursery, there are your areas. Purple Worm Tunnel leads out. This is Area 7 of the Wormwrithings through this area, but the tunnel's mouth is 40 feet above the cavern floor. So you got to like drop ropes and get in and out and all that stuff. So at this point, I think up around Area 8, or they went back to the expedition. They stealthed back to the echo chamber, went back to the expedition. Everybody's together. They decided what to do. And this is where the discussion of which way is the Beholder's Lair, because they're starting to talk about the Beholder's Lair, and they got the note, and it says, well, west. And they're like, well, how do we get back to the Wormwrithings? And, I'm like, well, the only way you know of right now is right up above you, because you're in Area 1, and that's where you came in. But they're thinking, they're like, well, we already came from that way, so let's see if we can find another way out of here. So I'm like, ouch, because I really wanted them at this point to just leave and let's go to the Beholder area, because there's really not a whole lot of interest left in the Purple Worm area, other than maybe more purple worms. So, but they can do what they want. Again, they're players. I'm not going to force them. I'm not going to put them on rails. But me personally as DM, I'm like, let's go. Anyway, they went, and then there's other little tunnels off of Area 8 they haven't explored yet. Players being players, shiny. So they wanted to explore some more. Okay, fine. So everybody's back together. Except they don't take any expedition members with them, but they do take, all the party members, including, and they take the shield guardian, the dwarf with the plate mail, the people that teleported out and came back in, and they're like, well, let's go look around a little bit more and see if we can find a way out of the Worm Nursery into the Wormwrithings. So they ended up deciding to go towards Area 12. And Area 12 is just a big cavern with a chasm in the middle of it. Okay, and I'll read your Area 12 real quick. A chasm cuts across this cavern, stretching from wall to wall. The chasm is 10 feet wide, 200 feet deep, and slopes down to the southwest at a 60-degree angle. The chasm's slope can be climbed with a successful DC 15 strength athletics check. A creature that fails the check by 5 or more goes tumbling down the slop to the bottom of the, I don't know what slop they're talking about. They must be talking about, there's the slop from Area 10. They talk about slop that has purple worm saliva in it. A creature that goes tumbling down the slop. They probably meant slope, because they're talking about a slope. So it's probably just a typo. They probably meant to say slope, not slop. Tumbling down the slope, even though Area 10 is a slop cave, to the bottom of the chasm, taking damage from the fall is normal. I mean, you probably don't want to, if you're at 200 feet deep, you probably don't want to take 200. That'd be 20 D6 falling damage, or does it cap? Do you hit a point where it just caps the amount? Because I think it's a D6 for every 10 feet you fall. Maybe it caps at a certain amount. But I guess it's potentially up to 20 D6. At the bottom of the chasm lie the skeletons of 2 Sverfneblum who tried to leap across the chasm while being chased by a purple worm. Lying near the remains are 2 miner's picks and a small leather pouch containing a gem of brightness. So, here's a chasm that kind of slopes 200 feet down. And you got a party wanting to get across it. Some of the party members can run and jump. Some of them can potentially fly or spider climb. Not everybody can. So anytime you're presented with something like this, there's going to be discussion among the players that many times leads to, let's say, interesting proposed solutions. So one of the solutions that was proposed was to go chop up a big enough section of the purple worm and wedge it into the chasm and just walk across. That was one of the things that was proposed. I said, well, y'all can try to do that. You don't know how long it'll take. So they're wanting to, like a big coin of purple worm and just shove it down in there. Why not, right? But that was literally, they seriously considered that for a little while. Another thing is they were like, let's have because the shield guardian is a large creature, let's let the shield guardian like lay across it and we'll walk across the shield guardian. And that's kind of where it came up with, let me see what you can do. And I was like, I'm not sure you can tell it to do that. And then, I didn't let this fly, but I thought it was funny. I gave him points for creativity. The player was like, but the chasm is my enemy. Tell the shield guardian to attack the chasm by laying on it, which was kind of funny. But anyway, they ended up, because the walls are fine. So, the chasm is along the floor, but the walls of the cavern at this point are fine. So, you can spider climb, you can jump. I think they had somebody jump across and hold a rope or pitting in a rope. Anyway, they got everybody across without a lot of problem. But the proposed solutions were pretty funny. And then at this point, they could either go north or they could go east. And if they go east, they immediately hit another echo chamber. Remember, they got, at least my guys have the shield guardian with them, but that will then lead them to area 13, which would take them out of the Wormwrithings. And they don't have the expedition with them. So they're like, whatever we find, we're going to have to go back and get the expedition. So also keep in mind, I did not open up tunnels T2 and T3 on my map of the Worm Nursery. So keep that in mind. If your players explore, they may have different, you could bypass that chasm altogether using T2 or T3. Or even if you went north into the other area 5 off of the Worm Nursery proper in area 8. So what they did is they ended up going north up to area 11, which is a spider nest. This is pretty much where we ended. The eastern half of this cavern floor is covered in webs stretching up to the ceiling. See Dungeon Hazards in Chapter 5 of the Dungeon Master's Guide for Rules About Webs. 8 giant spiders lurk in the nest, minus any killed elsewhere in the nursery. What I did, just because this party is so OP, and 8 spiders would have been like, they would have barely noticed. Just for the fun of it, I had 16 spiders in there. So we just had a big spider fight. It was fine. It was fun. Some of the players, because there are so many spiders, the spiders almost doubled. If the shield guardian hadn't been there, then they would have doubled. It would have been 2-1. That many spiders against players. So some of the players did take some damage. Nobody seriously got to where they were in real trouble. This is where the burning hands and the hunger of Hadar came from that I talked about towards the beginning of the recap. Because somebody was wanting to burning hands more than one spider, but the hunger of Hadar was right behind them, and and all this stuff. So anyway, just had a big 16 giant spiders fight, which took a while, but wasn't necessarily super dangerous to the players. And then we finished there. So, I probably won't go blow by blow for the rest of the Worm Nursery. We've done there's like a slop cave with a little bit of treasure under worm saliva, which is disgusting. But I mean, we've basically talked about it. So unless the players specifically go into some areas that I haven't talked about yet, I'm probably not going to talk much more about the Worm Nursery. Hopefully they'll exit out and we'll do a good portion of the Beholder layer next session. I probably, if I can avoid it, will not start the fight or have the fight start or whatever next session with Beholder, because it'll probably take a full session to do that fight, just because the layer is so weird, and the a lot of the tactics that this group normally uses are probably going to be minimized or nullified, so it could be a long fight. So anyway, that's it. That's where we finished. Thanks so much for watching. I do welcome and love your questions and comments and viewer feedback and all that stuff. And hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it helps. Leave it a comment and a thumbs up if you would on YouTube. That helps me out a lot. Please share this content with people that you think might enjoy it. A lot of people seem to get a benefit out of it. May the dice rolls always be in your favor, and we will catch you next time on Shameless. Thanks for watching.